Hello and welcome. Right, so we're going to basically start building up the animation for this WIS website. And if you've not joined us in the previous lesson, I'll leave a link, down below in the description where you can, go back to the previous lesson and learn how we basically built the entire landing page from scratch. All right, so the major focus of this lesson would just be about, we're trying to animate each and every little component that will come across, just make it have a better feel. So the end product of what we'll be building will look something similar to this. I'm just going to refresh it. Good. You can say that we have, okay, so just to mention, we have a combination of a smooth scroll effect, right? With Lennis, we have animations done with Figma motion, right? And also we have ability to interject the scroll effect using the React intersection observer, right? So what we're going to do is whenever we hover this, we are going to basically say we're going to have this icon rolling. So I'm going to hover over this. You can see we animated that icon on top to become rolling, and if you notice, if you pay attention to it, we also have this text animated to have like a gradient view. So when I hover over this, we have this kind of effect, right? Good, right? So, and also when you refresh it, it comes in from beneath and this come in from the left. So let's do that again. Boom, right? So this actually come in from on top here. I think we could actually make it from the left as well if we want. I think it comes in from on top currently, right? So I'm going to scroll down a bit. Good, we have this section animated as well. So you can see when I leave the view, when I come back, it's going to reanimate, right? So this is because we're actually setting a flag to true, right? So there's actually a specific flag. This I will show you later on. Is actually called a trigger once. Yeah. So that's actually the flag. So I'm going to scroll down. You can see this behavior. So I'm going to scroll down again. Rotate in, and also when you are scrolling out of the view, it's going to change the transformation back to 90-degree backwards. So as I scroll, notice it. Boom. Going to take it back and it's going to scale it down to 0.5. So let's go again. Let's go again. You can see it's going to like scroll it down that way. So that's actually a very cool animation. I'm going to show you how you can do that easily with Figma motion, right? So I'm going to go there, come down, and also you can see that our text here is actually animating quite smoothly, right? So I think that is actually like the part I want to show you guys, and yeah, I'm going to refresh it one more time and show you guys the highlight. Good, wonderful, right? So without further ado, I think we should start building this. So when we're done, we're going to just deploy this. I think that's actually like an extra bonus package. We're going to deploy this to Vercel so you guys can actually play around with the actual link. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go straight to the code base to try to understand what's going on, right? And meanwhile, we have to put the code alongside the diagram side by side. Why we're doing this is it gives us enough, opportunity to be able to understand what's going on. So now I'm actually using eraser.io to draw this into different modules, right? Because I'm going to explain how the transition basically happens, how the animation happens, right? So we're going to focus on module 1. So module 1, basically we have this little icon here, right? And we have the image. So whenever we hover over the image, we want that icon to basically start rotating indefinitely, right? So the way we do this is, okay, go back to the code, open it up, go to the hero section, scroll up, right? So first of all, we have to import motion from Figma motion, right? So once you have that, the very next thing you do is you want to go to the actual component you want to animate, right? So now what we are doing is I've created a state here called allow rotation. It's just a basic state, and by default it is false. So what we are doing now is Figma motion basically has some properties that you can pass in called the on over start and on over end, right? We have on over as well, or while over. So on over start basically works in a very cool manner, because when you override, go back to the design, when you override the design, take in there, is the on over is going to trigger. On over start is going to trigger, but when you on over out like that, on over end will trigger. So that gives us a much more greater control on how to play around with other elements within the viewport, right? So I'm going to go back to the frame and design and try to explain this flow. So now we can actually see what we are doing in this stage is to basically, first off, we have the little icon. It's a separate component from the image itself. And what we want to do is we want to bring this image, from the bottom. Take it from the bottom up, right? So whenever we have over it, it's going to animate this text as well, change the gradient color to this, and also keep this one to be rotating indefinitely. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put a code alongside this, so we can basically understand, some of the understanding of this, right? So here we go. So I think there's a way to basically have this. Yeah, let me see. There should be a way to have something similar. Okay. Can we have like two different viewports? Yeah, I think if we could do that, that would be much more appreciated, right? So let's take this here. Okay, so I think that is okay. We can actually work with this. So now what is going on here is you can see what we're having. The initial state of the y-axis, we're taking it to 50% downwards, right? This is actually the row page. This is this image. So now on the initial scale, it should be like pushed downwards to 50%. And the opacity is 0. We are not seeing it, right? But when we begin to animate it, we want to set the y to the initial position and change the opacity to 1, right? So that actually brings it into the viewport. It will just be as if it's coming right from the bottom up, because we set y to be 50% here, right? So the transition here, this is a very, very cool one. So now we basically have to control the duration and the delay. So the duration that we want to set can actually be of anything. It's definitely a number. And what I normally do whenever I'm confused with any of what these variables, what each of these variables does, is I open it up, right? So open up, just hit control, click on it, and you're going to see the duration, and they will explain everything it does, right? So you can see this is the duration now. Duration of the twin animation set to 0.3 by default, right? Or 0.8 if animating in series of keyframes. So we are just in a single keyframes. We don't really have multiple series, so it's actually 0.3 by default. But now we are setting hours to 0.5. So that means it's going to take about 0.5 seconds, right? That's actually 500 milliseconds to be more precise for the animation to take place. All right, so we have a delay, right? Similarly, we have a delay of 500 milliseconds. So when you said that, these are just ways for you to control it, basically, right? So now, when we actually on over start, what we want to do is to make sure that we set allow rotation. Remember, this is a state we created up above, right? This is where we created that state. Set allow rotation. Initially, it is false, but when you come down here below, when the over start, we set it to true. When the over ends, we set it to false. So that way, we are able to control what we want to display, whether we want to keep animating this stuff or not. Okay, so now that we have that, what we are going to do now is, let me take it here. What we are going to do now is to make sure that we are following the right procedure, right? So if allow rotation is true, we want to rotate it by 360. We set duration to 1, and we just repeat it indefinitely, right? So this repeat definitely actually makes it to keep rotating without stop, right? I can go back, overwrite. As far as I'm within the viewport, it's going to try to do the first 1 second, and then continue again, do the next 1 second, and so on. It doesn't stop at all, right? So that's actually a very cool way for you to achieve that effect, right? So this is actually the way I do it, and it's a very, very cool way for you to handle transition. So I think with that, we can come in here. You can see for the text, what we are doing for the text is When allow rotation is true, we just set a text gradient. Text gradient is something that I've already like declared in the globals.css. This is just it with some linear gradients here and there, right? Nothing much going on, right? Just basic stuff. So come in here, and now you basically understand what we just did, right? Nothing much. We just once we have the allow rotation to be true, we tend to change the text color, and then we'll keep this little icon to be rotating indefinitely with the help of the repeat infinity. All right, so I think with that we've basically been able to cover this part. And yes, so one other part I think I must have missed is when you refresh the page the first time, we actually have like 50% offset. So let me show you that one. So you can see why. So y is 50% here. That's the 50% offset. So it will be as if it's coming from the bottom, right, to the top. So, and also the icon itself, I think so you can see the x is stated here as 100%. That means x is going to be, it will act as if it's coming from the right? So it's going to come, we are setting x to like 100x, right? So 100%. So 100% makes it's going to be far away to the right, and when it's done actually animating, it's going to come back to the 0 stage. So I think that actually makes sense in terms of how it should work. And yeah, that's why you basically have this little setup here. Going to have 100% offset, but then it's going to return back to 0, right, when it's done animating. So I think I've been able to explain the module 1. The more and more we go downwards, the more it becomes more complicated, but don't worry about it. I'm going to explain what each step basically does. Okay, so let's go to module 2. So module 2, basically we'll be needing the help of a different package. So first off, I think I need to show you how to basically install this. So for you to install Figma Motion, first of all, you basically need to come in here and do, okay, so just do Figma Motion. Right, I already installed it, so I will not be doing this. So you have to install this the first time, and also you basically need to install some other thing, right? So let's see, npm install, not Figma Motion, but React. Okay, React intersection observer. Right. So let me show you the npm package just for you to be sure. So npm, so this is the package. Yeah, so this just basically allows to track the scroll position. Yeah. So I'm going to go back, open up the code, and yes, there we go. So now we basically have to install this. Sorry about that. So install this. Right, I already have it installed, so I will not be installing this, right? But when you do, you need to basically have the Figma Motion, right, installed as a dependency. You basically have to have React intersection observer installed as a dependency. So when you have these two, we are good to go. So I'm just going to close it up. So now what we are going to do, we need to know when we get to this section, right? How do we know when we get to this section? This section is actually a separate component when we built it from the first tutorial. It's a separate component, and I'm going to show you that component. Okay, gonna open it up. So that component is actually the, okay, I think it's this company history section. All right, so let's check the design so be sure. So this is it. Just going to copy that and paste it here. Oh, it's the service section. Nice. Let's go back. This is to the service section. So now you can actually see what we are doing here. First of all, I need to give you guys a breakdown of it. So what we are doing here, though, it's very simple. First off, we want to be able to, bring all of these elements in one at a time, right? So each of these elements basically have its own generic index. The index of the first is 0. The index of the second is 1, and the index of the third is 2, right? So since we have this index, we can be able to manipulate a lot of things. So first of all, I'm going to open up the code, and I'm bringing use in view from React intersection observer and motion from Figma motion. So now I'm going to declare this, right? Use in view, basically set the threshold to 0.5. Threshold basically means your degree of freedom, basically, for you to be able to know, oh, this component is in viewport or not. So, and also we have the trigger ones. The trigger ones that we have here, we actually enable us, to trigger this particular animation either once or multiple times. When you set it to true, it's going to trigger once. But when you set it to false, it's going to trigger multiple times, right? So what we're going to do here is this reference, you're going to put it at the beginning of your component. So we actually know that, oh, this component is in view or not. So in view is actually a boolean. So if the component is in view, it's going to return true. If it's not in view, it's going to return false. Nice. All right. So now that we already have this, we are able to know when the component is in view. We can use this to do some other manipulations. All right. So in as much as we already know what we want, right? So we basically want to, when you start animating, you want to bring it down from the bottom. It should come from the bottom up. So we basically have Y to be 20% or whatever. And then we want to be able to set some amount of delay so that when this other one is actually showing up, it's showing up like 1 times 0.5, after the first one. So the first one was actually going to be, I think 0.0.5 because the first is actually index 0.0.5. So 0.5, in case you are wondering, is just like an arbitrary value I came up with. You can do your own. So it's actually will determine the way you have your delay. So now let's go over it. So look at it here. So Y is set to 20, like the way you have it in this actual design. So this is the Y. It's going to appear as if it's coming down from the bottom, the 20% to the top. So that is it. And then when it's actually done animating, Y is going to be 0. So now, if you ask, the initial opacity is 0. That means we are not seeing it, right? So, but when it's done animating, and if it's in view, right? If the component is in view, when it's done animating, it's going to be opacity is going to be set to 1, and we are going to see this component, right? And Y, right? This is very interesting. So Y, I already discussed what Y is, but the animate object basically has Y as well, right? So the Y here basically allows you to control the same Y you have here, right? So Y, if it's actually in view, is going to be 0, but if it is not in view, it's going to be the initial Y. I already told you that Y will actually behave as if it's coming from the bottom, right? So that's actually the behavior of it. And I'm going to show you, I think I should show you this. I'm going to refresh this. So let's scroll. You can see it's going to appear as if it's coming from the bottom, right? Go again. You can see it's coming from the bottom to the top. So that's actually the behavior we're having here. So Y is going to act as if it's coming from the bottom, and that's the same behavior you have here, right? So transition allows you to control, these are just our controller. Transition allows you to control the duration as well as the delay, right? So when you have a transition, you basically have to say, oh, how long do I want my transition to last? Here we are setting 500 milliseconds, and basically have a delay here. So now if you notice, this is actually each of the cards. We are wrapping a div around each of these elements. So that means each of these elements is going to animate at different times. We are inside a loop. Don't forget that. So the delay here, we are trying to control it with the index. So that means index 0, index 1, and index 2. So if you go in here, go back to the design. If you go in here, you can see this. The first one is actually index 0 right here. So the index is actually 0. Going to make sure that is black. So basically I have the index 0. I'm going to put it here. So at least it is self-explanatory. So we can just do 0 times 0.5. Right, so this is the first index you've come up with. So but this is actually index 1, but we are timesing it by delay of 500 milliseconds, which is 0.5 seconds. Right, so the other one is index 2, we're timesing it by 0.5 seconds, which is actually 500 milliseconds. Right, so this is actually very simple animation we have here. And if you go back to what we have, you're going to see similar thing, being controlled. This is how we are able to manage it. So the point of actually demonstrating this is for you guys to, to understand how it works, right? So I'm going to play around with the trigger ones and show you the actual behavior in real life. So I'm going to go in here, and let's say we have the trigger ones. So first of all, let me set it to true. This will only make this section to trigger only once. I'm going to scroll up and refresh. So it's animating. It's only going to animate once. Even if I scroll to the bottom and I scroll back, it doesn't animate anymore, right? So that's why it's actually very important. So I go to the bottom, I go to the top, it doesn't animate. But when I change it back to false, scroll up and refresh. So I'm going to scroll down. So you can see it animates. Go out of the view, come back again, it animates again. So this is actually the behavior I want. So you can actually be using this particular flag to control that, right? So it's actually left to you the way you want it. So you can use this flag to control that behavior, right? So I think I'm just going to recap. Let me recap. So now we already have like 3 basic screens. And each of these screens is going to first of all appear that it's coming from the bottom, right? So we're actually giving y 20% from the bottom. So it's, by default, the opacity is 0. And then we're just going to say, oh, it should be coming from the actual bottom. And then we're going to set some delay by playing with the actual index of each of these chords. So the index is actually 0, 1, and 2, right? So with this, we can be able to, control how we set the delay. So this is going to appear first, but this is going to like wait for an extra 500 milliseconds to appear. And this is going to wait for an extra, let's see, 0.5 times 2, 0.5 times 2, for an extra second. So this is going to wait for an extra second to appear. But this is going to appear in 500, milliseconds, right? This is going to appear first with no delay, right? But this is going to appear in 500 milliseconds, and this is going to appear in 1 second. 1 is actually gotten from 2 times 0.5. That's 1. All right. So I think this actually makes sense to you. And I'm going to go over through the third module. And so the third module is to be able to, animate this particular card. No, the idea here is we want to be able to have this card, and at the same time, we want to have a situation where we control existing what we have. Sorry about that. So we want to be able to control exactly what we have, right? So now if you take a look at this card, we already have it this way, right? It's like this by default. And one thing we want to do is we want to rotate it by 45%. Actually, I changed this to 90%, by the way. So this is now 90. Yes, so this is actually 90%. And the scale, so now we want to be able to like make it well smaller when we scroll off of this particular view. It becomes more smaller, but then we'll just rotate it to, to 90%. So 90% we should just, keep it kind of horizontal, right? So it's going to keep it in a horizontal level, right? So this is actually the schematics for this. And we also have the trigger ones that we can use to control the trigger behavior of it. And let's go over to the code and understand what we're doing here. First of all, let's go here. Let me copy this text so we can dive into these components. Okay, so there we go. First of all, we bring in the ref from the using view from the React intersection observer, right? We bring in motion from Figma motion. The very next thing we do is we already have our image, and we want to basically, animate this particular image, right? And also, this we don't need to animate this. You just leave this as a div. That's completely fine. So notice anything that you want to animate, that's the thing you wrap around motion.div in Figma motion. That's actually the convention. So because anything you basically wrap as this basically has access to more and more Figma motion properties and and so on. So what we are doing here is the initial size of this, right, is small, right? So it has 0.5, scale, right? So 0.5 scale. So this scale is what you use to basically make it way smaller than it normally is. And we're going to rotate it by default first. It's going to be minus 90 degrees, right? So when it's actually in view, we want to set the scale to 1, which is 100% scale. And we want to, when it's not in view, we want to make it very small, set it to the initial scale. So when we rotate it, if it's in view, we want to make it 0 degree, no rotation whatsoever. But if it is not in view, we want to apply the minus 90 degree to it, right? That's the more reason. When it's no longer in view, it's basically have this 0.5 scale and it has minus 90 degrees in rotation, right? So that's actually the way we are able to, achieve this. And it is very easy, come to think of it. And also, as I told you before, transition is just a way for you to be able to control your animation. You can set the delay, you can set the duration, you can set the delay, and so on, right? So this is actually a very unique way for you to control your animation, and that's how it is being controlled. So, right? So I think now you guys basically understand, the way it works technically, and it's just about you going through the entire flow again, trying to understand how we basically over this and have this animated, right? So basically we are setting some sort of offset vertically and horizontally. That's vertically on the y-axis and horizontally on the x-axis. So for module 2, we are using a combination of using view and Figma motion, and then on the y-axis we are actually setting it to be 20% to make it appear as if it's coming from the bottom, right? So we are using the index, to basically manipulate the delay, right? So that if this actually appear first, this should appear like 500 milliseconds after the first, and this should actually appear like 200 milliseconds after, a second, sorry. This should appear like 1 second after, after the second, I think. So I think this actually gives us like an idea of how it should basically work. And also I explained the trigger once. The trigger once allows it to basically animate once, or if you set it to true, it animates once. If you set it to false, you're going to animate as many times as possible as far as you are within the view. And also we have the module 3. So what module 3 does is it gives us enough privilege to be able to, scale this down a bit when it's no longer in view to like 0.5, right? That's like 50%, right? And also we basically have to rotate it 90% when it's not in view. So this was actually what we were able to achieve using Figma motion and also the React intersection observer. So I think I've been able to pass this accurately to you guys. And also I actually promised that I will be deploying this app, and the way I do that is to basically push all this code to the remote repository. Just going to do chore, and I'm going to push this out. And the way I push that is to basically, I think I made some updates here. Okay, so updated the div. And all right, I'm going to commit that, sync changes. So I'm going to make sure that everything here is actually in the main branch, and that will give us enough privilege to be able to, to deploy. Okay, so deploy it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go to Vercel. I already have an account, but if you do not have, you want to just create one account, which is all right. So I'm going to add a new project. Okay, so I'm going to create a project. Okay, so this waste Figma motion is project. I'm going to import it. Right, I'm going to, just basically deploy, right? There's nothing much. We don't have environment variables or anything. Just click on that deploy button. That's going to try to, deploy it for us. And also, I'm going to be leaving the link for this particular project in the video's description, so you guys can, understand how everything works. And also, I think I can be able to, to export this as well, right? I think you guys basically need to play around with Eraser more. It gives us like cool features for us to be able to, picture these things out before we even start implementation. That way, it's actually very easy for us to understand what we are animating, how we are moving from one point to another. And also, I think in my future tutorials, I will actually be playing around with timelines, because this allows us to work with multiple animations at the same time, probably in the same timeline, and that gives us much more control. I think in future lesson or tutorial, I'm going to be explaining that as well, right? So while we wait for our project to basically deploy, I think it's still deploying. Deployment completed. Just wait a bit, and yeah, continue to dashboard. Okay, good. These are projects right here, and then visit. Boom. Basically, I have a project live on the internet, and you can see it's coming in nice and clean as expected, properly animated and smooth, right? So this is what we've been able to build today, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it, right? Thank you guys for joining, and yes, I'm going to catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.